Welcome to the Explainer. Every nation is really built on a few core ideas: citizenship, democracy, and the rule of law. But what happens when those ideas develop in the wrong order? To see what that looks like, we're diving into the really unique case of Brazil. So let's break this down. We're talking about three huge ideas that are really the bedrock of any modern society. First, the state of law, which just means nobody is above the law. Then there's democracy, the idea that power ultimately comes from the people. And finally, citizenship, which defines all of our rights and our duties within that system. I want you to think of them like three massive, interlocking gears that make a society run. They're totally interdependent. They have to mesh perfectly because, if one of those gears jams up or even just slows down, the whole machine, well, it's in danger of grinding to a complete halt. So to really get why these gears can jam, especially in Brazil's case, we first have to look at let's call it the textbook way things are supposed to go. This is the standard blueprint for how citizenship rights usually develop. Yeah, this classic model comes from a sociologist, T.H. Marshall. He basically studied how rights evolved over in England and created this roadmap that, for a long time, people saw as the way for modern nations to develop. So, according to Marshall, it's all about building blocks. It's a very logical, bottom-up process. First up, in the 18th century, you get your basic civil rights: freedom of speech, the right to a fair trial. Then, once you have that foundation, the 19th century brings political rights, like the right to vote. And only then, on top of all that, do you get social rights in the 20th century: education, healthcare, and so on. See? It's a logical progression. But, and this is a huge but, this is where Brazil's story just completely veers off the path. Brazil did not follow the textbook. In fact, its journey was almost the exact opposite. Yeah, Brazil basically turned this whole sequence upside down. Social rights, things like labor protections, they often came first. But here's the catch. They were granted by the state from the top down. Political rights came later, but that crucial foundation, basic civil rights for everyone, that part has always been shaky. And that inversion, man, it has had some really deep, long-lasting consequences. And this created what scholars call regulated citizenship. It's a fascinating idea. Instead of rights being something you're born with, something universal, the state became a kind of gatekeeper. It would hand out the status of citizen to certain people, often based on what kind of official job you had. I mean, this quote just says it all, right? For a huge chunk of history, your citizenship was basically tied to your job. The worker's ID card, that was your ticket to being a citizen. But what if you didn't have one? What if you were unemployed or worked in the informal sector? Well, you were pretty much a non-citizen, completely locked out of the system. Okay, so let's fast forward. How does this shaky historical foundation hold up today? Well, as you can imagine, it's under some serious pressure. Those old cracks are being pried open by some very modern problems. And look, these challenges aren't unique to Brazil. We see them everywhere. But they hit different. They hit harder when the foundation is already fragile. We're talking about the whole nasty cocktail: democratic erosion, a tidal wave of disinformation, people feeling like their leaders don't represent them. All of it just puts a massive strain on those three gears we talked about at the beginning. So that begs the question, right? When the whole system is under attack, when the very institutions that are supposed to protect you are the ones being targeted, how does a democracy even begin to fight back? How do you start to repair that damage and rebuild trust? Well, we can get some real-world answers by looking at a 2023 report from Brazil's Attorney General's office, the AGU. It gives us this incredible inside look at the state actively trying to reconstruct itself. And honestly, the theme of the report itself says so much: citizenship, democracy, and reconstruction. That last word is key. This isn't just about maintaining the status quo. It signals a very conscious, very deliberate project to rebuild the democratic framework from the ground up. And this wasn't just talk. After the January 8th attacks on government buildings, the AGU got to work. And the numbers here are pretty striking. We're talking about seeking 100 million reals in damages, freezing over 26 million from the people who funded the attacks, and launching major lawsuits to hold people accountable. This was about making it clear that attacking democracy has real consequences. And their work went way beyond just that one event. They went after this on all fronts. They set up a whole new national office just to fight disinformation. They filed hundreds of new lawsuits to protect the environment. And they got serious about promoting human rights, tackling these deep, ugly problems like racism and violence against women. And then there's this number, 2.1 million. That's how many legal cases they wrapped up, not by fighting them out in court for years, but through cooperation and agreements. I mean, think about that. That's a huge effort to make the government itself more efficient, to solve problems instead of just creating more conflict. It's a way to rebuild trust, one case at a time.
So, when you pull it all together, what's the big lesson here? I think it's that citizenship isn't this static thing you just have. It's not a dusty certificate in a drawer. It's alive. It's something that is constantly being fought for, defended, and, as we've just seen, actively reconstructed.
And that leaves us with one last and maybe the most important question. If the job of the state is this massive project of reconstruction, then what's our job? What is the citizen's role and responsibility in all of this? That's definitely something to think about.